Hello, everyone. I appreciate you checking out this podcast. My name is Eric Warren. I'm a junior here at East Tennessee State University, and today I'm going to be doing a presentation on Pedro Luis Boitel and his struggles through the Castro administration for Dr. Newcomer's class. So let's get on into it, shall we? All right. So before we start on the main character, let's take a look at what was happening right now in Cuba. During this time, around the 1950s, Cuba is going through its famous revolution. And also during this time, political boundaries were uneven. You were either with the winning side or the losing side. And later on in the Castro administration, what we'll see is that if you were with the losing side, you lost big. And again, during the beginning stages of the Cuban Revolution, we see that start to build up. One side is beginning to pick up, while the other side is starting to lose power. And there was one character in specific during the early stages of the revolution named Fidel Castro. And early on, he was gaining both military power as well as political power. People were starting to look at him kind of like a figure of the people. He was willing to go the distance and get on the front lines in order to spread the message that he believed was right. And at this time, America was picking up on this situation because it was revealed that it was a communist revolution. They were promoting communism right outside of America's doors. And also during this time, America and Russia were not on steady ground. They were also having, a battle between political ideals. It was either a win-lose situation. And the fact that there was a communist party building up right outside of Florida, this was a big deal. The American government needed to change the way that these people thought. And that was when we launched the Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961. And this became a military disaster. It was a complete failure. We stumbled, and it heightened the tension between communists versus capitalists. So let's move on here. And here I've got a couple pictures for you. The one on the left is Fidel Castro getting ready to give a speech. And then on the right, I found it was very interesting because, again, right picture, far left, we see Fidel Castro, and in the middle, we see Che Guevara. And what I thought was very interesting about this picture was the fact that they are walking arm in arm. And today we see sports teams, and we also see actors, come out on stage at the end of a play, and they'll bow, and they're locked arms because they're all together. It's a unity, a brotherhood. And in this case, their brotherhood was this revolution. And this isn't just one line of people locking arms. You can see behind them there are rows and rows of people. And what I also thought was funny was that this brotherhood was all decked out, and you see one guy in a suit, but then the rest of them have their army boots, they're tucked in, they've got their vests on, they're ready to go to work. And this was just another symbol that they were ready to go the distance together in order to spread their message. And here we have another picture. This is where the Bay of Pigs is located. And right above Cuba here, we can see, or we're getting ready to see Florida. So again, I want to emphasize that this was just right on the edge of the United States of America. So overall, during this time, Cuba was struggling to stay even. They were going back and forth, and they weren't fighting America all the time. The Bay of Pigs was a brief military action, but they were also fighting each other, and it was a brutal time. Again, if you were on the losing side in this case, you lost big. And during the Castro administration, sometimes if you spoke out against his administration and what they believed in, you could just disappear. Your family wouldn't know what happened to you. You may not know what happened to you. You could just wake up and you would be in a different place. And that's what we'll see later on with Boitel. And Cuba would slowly develop this reputation of being a cruel area. And in a documentary called, I'm going to try and pronounce this correctly, it's Nadia Eschahaba, and it was directed by Nestor Almendros and George Ula, and they briefly describe what the prisons were like, and it was brutal. They would torture people, especially political prisoners. They would torture people, and there was also one of the people they interviewed that survived the prisons even said that there was a room full of snakes. Now, I can't imagine I can't imagine even thinking about a room full of snakes, let alone actually being thrown into it. It is very troubling times back then. So this is our main character here. This is Pedro Luis Boitel. And when I see this picture, I see somebody who is dressed for success. He is willing to go the distance in order to help his people. And contrary to the previous picture of the Brotherhood that we saw, instead of wearing camo, he's got his military vest on and boots. Instead of that, we see a man who has his hair nice. He's got it cleaned up, ready for this picture. He's got a tie on, and he's presenting himself as an individual that is very productive and neat in his life. And he was ready to go the distance in the sense that he saw what was happening with the Castro administration, and he was willing to face them head on, Castro and his cruel judicial system. And once this happened, once he started speaking out against them, he understood the fact that this would paint a target on his back. And let me rephrase that, not just on his back, but he was essentially a walking bullseye for anybody that was allied with the Communist Party in Cuba, because his outcries against the cruel treatment of individuals was completely against the winning side. Again, going back to that winning and losing side. He was on that losing side and trying to fight the big kid on the block, and it was bad. Eventually, he would be arrested and he would be sent to prison. Now, his family knew that he was arrested, and it was a symbol. He was a symbol of the people, kind of like how Castro was a symbol for the Communist Party. Boitel was taken, and he had done enough outcries and outreaches against the Communist Party that the people took notice when he was gone. Of course, his family took notice because that's their son, their cousin. He's gone. But the people in the community also saw that there was this figure that was missing. So once he was arrested, his struggle continued. Once he was arrested, the prisons emphasized forced labor. And again, going back to that documentary, they talked about how they would just work hours and hours. And some people would do whatever it took to not be forced into labor. The survivor that they interviewed also mentioned that he saw someone cut off their big toe in order to stay away from forced labor. That is a drastic action in order to stay out of working. But that is what they had to do in order to survive. But Boitel took a different approach. Instead of harming himself like that or fighting the guards and using violence to prove his message, he decided to fight with his gut. And I'm not talking about using his instincts. I'm talking about he used hunger strikes. And he would just completely refuse food. He would not do it. And it brought more attention to him. You saw the picture. He's a good-looking guy. He seemed healthy. He started to deteriorate. And he did not want to be dependent on this government to give him food. And plus, he didn't know what was happening with that food. They're throwing you in a room full of snakes. Who knows what they're doing to your food? And there was also a rumor that the Castro administration was also keeping water from him so that he would get dehydrated and then in that way die. But he would stay on course and he would continually refuse food. And in 1972, he did die in prison through one of his hunger strikes. And after his death, his family and all the community gathered up together, and they understood that violence was not the way to fight against the communists and against an oppressive government, but we should step back and look at other routes that we can take in order to spread our message. And Boitel understood that. He understood that there are some steps you can take that will take you down a good path, and then there are steps that you can take that could cause more trouble. And in this case, the only trouble that he caused and the only harm that he caused was to himself because of these hunger strikes. So overall, Boitel is one of these legends. Again, going back to the political figure of Castro during the revolution, he was one of these hidden characters that started to emerge as the insurgents against the Communist Party started to unfold. He is one of these legends that is still talked about today. There are biographies about him, there are documentaries about him. So I would recommend looking into his character if you are interested in this time period in Cuba. So I want to thank you all for listening to my presentation. I appreciate you checking it out all the way through the end. So my name is Eric Warren again. Y'all have a good day. Thank you.